Well, hello there, Digging Deeper. We are back, and I'm just going to tell you this right now. If you're looking for a commentary on Leviticus, X out of this and go back a week, because we are now officially in a new book. Hey, my name's Tim, if you are new to Digging Deeper, and I'm here with the M&Ms. That's right, I got Mark and Michelle, patent pending. I can't copyright that, it's already been said. But you guys recognize Mark. Mark, how you doing?
Good, yeah.
All right,
Been a good day.
Been a good day for you?
Yeah.
All right, Mark's got a big weekend coming up here in about 2 weeks, right?
That's
Your
right.
son is getting married.
That's right.
Yes.
Cody and Kenzie, yeah.
And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be a party. I think so.
Yep.
And then to my left, we have a brand new face for some of you. But if you attend, honestly, any of our campuses, there's a good chance you've seen Michelle lead worship. So, Michelle, take a few minutes and just kind of what your role here is at River Valley.
Okay, yeah. Well, like you said, I'm one of the worship leaders. So part of the downtown campus ministry team, but then also leading it at all of the campuses. So such a pleasure for me to be able to do that. So every weekend pretty much I'm leading somewhere. So if not downtown, then I cycle out to one of the other campuses. So
and you've been to every campus except Sunny Valley, right?
Yeah, not yet. But Frank's already pitched it to me. So
all right.
It's such a blessing having Michelle on our
you.
worship team, and she does you do a great job.
Thank you.
So do you have a favorite other campus, and does it rhyme with Rogue River? That's my question.
Oh, yeah, let me see.
I don't want to put you on the spot quite yet. We'll get you on here a few more times. So also, you are currently going to school, correct?
I am.
What are you going to school for?
Yeah, well, I'm at George Fox University, the Portland Seminary
at
George Fox, and I'm working on an MDiv, which is a Master of Divinity.
Okay.
So I just finished my first year. I'm in the middle of my summer intensives. Each summer they do some intensive classes, so the coursework runs through each summer until I graduate. So it's a 4-year degree. It's a pastoral and ministry degree, and I'm just loving it so far. It's really great.
Okay.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to pull from your guys' knowledge the M&Ms of wisdom. I don't know. I need to put that to bed. That's not working out well for me. We're going to dig right into it. So we are in Philippians, and it was real fun. I got to teach the intro out at Rogue River, and just fun to dig into this book. Again, loved Leviticus, loved everything Leviticus had to offer, but I love the contrast of the two. Obviously, just night and day different. But first, before anything, really, we're going to look at Philippians. We're going to look at people there. But let's talk about Paul. Let's talk about the author. And kind of had a fun question that I sent these two before to kind of think about. And if there was a movie on Paul's life, who would play him and why? Better yet, how would we describe or represent Paul, the author of this letter, in today's world? So I'm curious to see what you guys came up with. Did you guys come up with a specific person or just character traits?
Oh man, I could not come up with a specific one. I actually ended up thinking of an actor, and I didn't even know his name. I've seen him. He's a character actor, and he is Ukrainian-born, Israeli. You guys would probably know him. It's Mark Ivanir, I think is his name, which doesn't ring a bell probably for anybody. It didn't for me, but when I saw his face.
Okay.
I couldn't really come up with an individual, like a specific person, but just it really got me to thinking about Paul, what Paul was like as a person, and even maybe my conception of Paul over the years as I've read his letters and and his New Testament writings. But what about you, Mark? Did you have one come to mind?
There actually is a movie about Paul.
Yeah.
And it's been a couple of years, but I was impressed. James Faulkner.
James Faulkner, yeah.
And I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, when you look at the picture, he's not the guy I would have thought.
No.
It's funny, we were actually talking about this.
Jesus wouldn't be either.
Well, right.
I mean,
it's funny. Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, he actually played Luke in that movie.
That would have confused me if I'd seen it.
Right, that's true.
I was like, man, is Jim Caviezel just playing like Bible character bingo and just trying to be everybody? He's got two big ones out of the way, but he wasn't Paul in that movie.
Yeah.
So
I was trying to think of someone who has Paul's characteristics, and
I couldn't think of anyone.
I mean,
either.
Tom Hanks can play anything.
Tom Hanks,
Leonardo DiCaprio, he can do a lot too. Gene Hackman, there's a
wow, yeah.
Okay,
I guess are we talking about the younger Paul or the older version of Paul too? Because then I was trying to think of younger actors when Paul was, Saul even at that point.
Right.
So let's unpack some of those traits, though. What do you think if you had to kind of list Paul in 5 words? What are some words you're using to kind of describe him to somebody?
He's pretty zealous.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean,
Fiery.
Yeah. Which the Lord ended up using for good. You know, wasn't so good initially, but then that same character trait that he had, though, just he maintained that, and then it just started serving the Lord with that same fire that he had.
Okay.
Yeah, man, what a scary blend of qualities. Maybe scary is not the right word. Unique, like incredibly task oriented. Like he had vision and just made things happen. I mean, in a very intentional, purposeful kind of a way. But then he's off the charts people person.
Right.
Like he
But
just
you don't see
loves
very
people.
often.
No, I mean that's a blend, and you know, very much type A, make things happen, but very much like on his knees. Like he
Right.
just drips this prayer, like we can't do anything without the Lord, and you know, like ambition, I want to get to Rome, want to get over here, want to get to Spain. And then he's like content, chained to a Roman guard.
Right.
I mean, just who is this guy?
Discernment, attuned to the Holy Spirit. I kind of imagine, I forget when I was thinking about this, of like what going out to like lunch with him would be like. And I feel like I'd be sitting there and be like, hey, I want to know about you. And he seems like the guy that would eat his lunch in 5 minutes and be like, we need to go. People are just passing by. They don't know Jesus. We need to go. And I'm like, I haven't even eaten my appetizer yet. Like, which would be good, but it would be exhausting maybe to be running with them, unless obviously you had the same passion. But
Right.
Well, like even we talked about Sabbath a couple weeks ago, and I'm having a hard time picturing Paul on Sabbath. I'm sure it's my problem because I'm sure he had some kind of a rest rhythm, but man, that guy, and he was all about like leaders. You know, he really wanted to put other people into the work and train them up and invest in their lives, and he was just really committed to just train up other people. Totally.
So I'm thinking, and listeners, this is to you if you want, whether it's on our social media, who would play Paul in a movie? The jury is still out, but I'm almost wondering whether it's the actor or the character, but Aragorn. So Viggo Mortensen.
Oh,
I wonder if
see, I thought
Aragorn, that kind of persona would have been good for a Paul figure. But
pretty
listeners,
intense.
we want to hear what I have to say. It could be fun to see what we come up with. So, all right, well, that's Paul. But now I want to get to some more of the specific characters. So, Mark, we're going to send this one to you. This idea of who is Timothy and why is he important to add into this letter, and then who are some key players in the town and the church of Philippi. And so those are the first two questions I'm going to send to you. But
so the book of Acts is helpful to give us some background on Timothy. He lived in a town called Lystra, and Paul came through there on his missionary journey and met Timothy probably as a teenager. Timothy had a godly mother and grandmother, we know, Lois and Eunice, but his father was Greek, and we assume that means he was not a believer or wasn't a believer yet. And so Timothy was highly regarded by the church there in Lystra, and Paul sort of took Timothy under his wing and then took him on some of his missionary journeys. And so Timothy, not perfect, by any means. I mean, we know he was timid. We know that he had some physical issues and struggle, sickness. So, he wasn't what maybe the world would think is like a great person or a great leader, but he ends up becoming a pretty amazing, powerful man of God. Paul, like I said, took him on his missionary journeys, had him actually stay in some cities. Ephesus comes to mind, was a place where Timothy stayed and actually pastored for a number of years. And I didn't realize something, kind of dug in a little deeper on this today, that when Paul and Silas go through that whole Philippi ordeal in Acts 16, and they get beaten up, and that whole slave girl releasing the demon out of her and all that, it's likely that Timothy's there.
Okay.
Timothy is with Luke and the others. There's a bigger group there than just Paul and Silas.
Okay.
So Timothy would have likely seen this stuff go on. Yeah. And I mean, other characters in the book, of course, there are not many.
Right.
But you have Epaphroditus, mentioned in chapter 2, who is likely a member of the Philippi church, and he ends up bringing an offering to Paul in prison, actually. And when he gets there, he gets sick to the point of death. God heals him, and then when he goes back to Philippi, that's when Paul gives him the letter to send back to that church. We also know of a couple of ladies.
Some wild names.
Yodia and Syntyche, and they will go down as the only thing we know about them in the Bible is that they couldn't get along.
They had a dispute of some kind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chapter 4, I think, and they end up they're just fighting over something. But the thing is, these aren't just church members; these are co-laborers with Paul. So they had like a leadership role in the church. It seemed like women had a really high leadership role in the church, with Lydia, who ends up, kind of being the hostess for the church in her home. These two ladies, which weren't doing well, and it's so interesting. Like Paul calls them out publicly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like me. Hey, Michelle and Tim, you guys need to get along.
Right.
In my letter to the church.
Right. We're all like, oops, and it's being read aloud, to the church.
So that's kind of an interesting.
They get put in that list of like people like Job's wife, where you got one sentence in the Bible accredited to you, and it's just a bad look.
Yeah.
Even though you probably were amazing. I mean, co-laborers, so they're not just chumps. Like,
right.
And it's like, man, we really couldn't get over our stuff, and got called out by Dad. Like, oh man.
Oh no.
So that's pretty much who's mentioned. A guy named Clement is mentioned as another co-laborer. The members of Caesar's household that send greetings. That's a cool picture too, because those would be, likely guards chained to Paul who are now believers.
Right. Or took that back to the household too. When we talk about Caesar's household, it would be just the larger, servants and gardeners maybe, or, it would have been a whole bunch of different people, not his family per se, but just people that helping that his household to function. But
So those are some of the names that come to mind. I think about the main characters in Philippians.
Yeah.
So on this timeline of the epistles that he wrote, Mark, where's this sitting in the timeline?
There's 4 epistles that are called the prison epistles, and most scholars believe they were written by Paul from Rome. So this would have been like 61 to 63 A.D. And God having to slow Paul down enough to get him writing, right?
Right.
And it's a cool picture that we see now that we have so much of these letters from him because God had him in jail for a while, So a little bit towards the end of Paul's life and career, not at the end, because we know he had some ministry that took place after that, but towards the end.
And this might just be completely, I don't know what the word is, objective or subjective. Would we have any argument to say this is one of his favorite churches that he was writing to? Or do you think that he probably just had this Paul amount of love for all of them?
Yeah, it seems like he had a personal relationship in a way with this church that he didn't necessarily have with the other ones. I think the letter definitely reads that way, and even just just the fact that in the opening verse he doesn't identify himself as an apostle. He omits that from this letter. Maybe for a couple of different reasons, but part of that could be that he just didn't need to because of this kind of close personal relationship that he seemed to have with them. But
all right. So maybe favorite isn't the right word, but there's a very personal, deep relationship that he might not have. Okay. Well, Michelle, I want to send it to you, and now we're gonna we've been looking at the people, so let's look at the letter. And a question I've always had, even as I was like studying, it comes up in my mind. So there's greetings at the beginning and the end. Can you kind of speak to why that we see that?
Well, it wasn't even just with this letter. I went back and looked and double checked, and with all of his letters, there is that kind of sort of a benediction of sorts and a greeting that comes at the end of the letters. And in this period of time, in this Greco-Roman, first century culture, letters were a common thing. So this wasn't something that we were just seeing from Paul. This you would have seen even outside of, would have just been common to have different types of letters. And so that was just part of the form of their letters. So I don't know that there would be anything more specific, to this or to the Philippians, but that was just part of the format and the convention of letter writing.
Okay, so like, hey, this is me starting the letter, this is me ending the letter.
Yeah, it's kind of just that closing benediction. What's is of note in this particular letter, Mark, that you already mentioned, was that he mentions, the saints in Caesar's household. Mm-hmm. We don't see that in the other letters, so that's unique to this one. But yeah.
I think too, Paul's so relational. I think it's a way to sign off, to open and sign off with affection.
Yeah.
Either the people that are with him, or the people that he's writing to, and we shouldn't forget how team oriented Paul was. This is not about Paul. Paul's always with somebody. He's always giving shout outs of, hey, we're partners in the gospel.
Right.
I need you all. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah, and that 4 or 5 times in the letter he uses that word. I think most of us are familiar with that word koinonia, that word fellowship, and it comes out in the letter as like right there in verse 5, I think, in chapter 1. But he uses it gets translated as participation. So he talks about their participation in the gospel. But that thread of koinonia runs through this letter in particular, and of course that type of fellowship is a much deeper. It's not just meeting casually and socially for punch and cookies. It's this idea of these people that are on this journey together, and they have this goal. We were talking about movies earlier, and it actually made me think of even like the Lord of the Rings stuff. And you mentioned a character from the Lord of the Rings, because I don't think it was any. I think it was intentional that Tolkien used that word fellowship in the title, the Fellowship of the Ring. So to me, it's that's such a great picture of this fellowship, and that we're seeing here in the Philippian church.
The original fellowship.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, so the series title, Joyride, is probably going to give this question away, but Michelle, to you, and then Mark, even if you want to chime in, I kind of wanted the tone of this letter. What are you defining? You're applying 1 or 2 words to just Paul's tone in this letter. And then also, after that, I just want to know very practically, what did this letter being read to the church actually look like? Because we just see it in our Bibles or whatever, but there was actually like a gathering to hear this letter. So first off, tone of the letter, and then the second question.
Yeah. Well, I see a couple of threads. Obviously, the joy theme that runs through this letter, but I think it's helpful to remember the context of the suffering that was going along with that joy. So it wasn't a happiness that was kind of a superficial thing, and it wasn't pretending that the suffering wasn't taking place. He was in prison, possibly going to be executed, and the Philippians, it sounded like, were being persecuted. They were in this city that was like a miniature Rome. And lots of ex-military and politicians, and there was just this dynamic in the city where they were facing persecution. Epaphroditus had been sick to the point of almost dying. And so there's just this suffering that's going on. So I guess I see, in some senses, those themes happening together. I also think it's really interesting, as I was studying and looking into this, how many times he mentions Jesus in the letter. Even in chapter 1 alone, he mentions Jesus or Jesus Christ. He mentions, I think, like 17 times. So it's more than once every 2 verses. So as often as he mentions joy in the letter, he mentions the name of Jesus considerably more. Okay. So
awesome. Yeah. I appreciated and I know you got a question at the end about resources. I appreciated the Bible Project and their video on Philippians, and how they brought out a really good point that I think is super important. We could miss this in the Joyride theme if we're not careful, and it's all about the humility and the lowliness of Christ. So our salvation, of course, is based completely on him humbling himself to the point of death on a cross, that at the name of Jesus, he became nothing so we could become everything. As I kept saying that in the message.
Book about nothings, right?
Book about nothings, right? But the idea that his humility is then the ethic for us. And then that actually opens the door for our joy. So it's countercultural. It's it's an upside down, backwards thing where we empty self in the sense of, like, it's not about me, it's about people. It's about the Lord, and in that's where joy comes. But yeah, I think Jesus is mentioned 40 times in the whole book.
Yeah,
like you say. It's just, So joy is mentioned 16 times, which definitely makes it very much thematically tied around joy. But more than anything, it's joy and the centrality and around the centrality of Jesus. And his humility and what he went through, for us.
And that unity and fellowship of the saints there that they had.
Yeah. And that he's Lord, because this Roman colony of Philippi and the retired soldiers and the dignitaries, and so they would have had just drilled into them that Caesar's Lord and there's no other Lord. And like there may be gods and stuff, but Caesar's the Lord. And so a lot of that persecution was coming from that. So any believers that thought different, that Jesus is Lord. So just that reminder that okay, Jesus humbled himself to death on a cross, but now he's highly exalted, Lord over all, and every knee will bow.
Yeah, I kind of think about it like if a boss is writing to employees, this isn't like, hey, we had a great year, we're so excited. This is like, hey, it's actually all hitting the fan right now, but like we still know it's going to be good. And so just a weird, I guess, contrast and joy. Because you totally get this excitement from them, but you're like, wait a minute, I wouldn't be this happy.
Well, and they would have been excited to see their friend come back. He came back bearing the letter, and so I can imagine there was joy, and just rejoicing in him being, returning to them, and then also to have received this letter from Paul.
Definitely. So while we're on that, receiving the letter, what, and again, you weren't there, but what would this have maybe looked like, the reading of this letter?
Yeah,
Is it getting passed around?
No, I don't know. My understanding that it would have been that people gathered in one person. So it could be that Epaphroditus possibly read it.
Yeah.
I don't think it tells us in the text who read it, but yeah, someone, they would say, hey, everyone, there's a letter from Paul, gather around. And so I could just see everyone gathering, maybe in Lydia's home, if they were still gathering there. And just like, sharing a meal maybe and reading this letter.
Yeah.
It would have been a neat, they didn't have the ability to connect with people when they're gone the way we do now. And so who knows how long it had been since they'd heard from him, and they wondered how he was doing. And I bet they hung on every word.
Yeah. In a world where I can get a text from somebody in another country in just the blink of an eye, like, imagine just, hey, they got a letter, we're reading it tonight.
Yeah. Everybody
potluck,
quick, go to Lydia's house.
Exactly,
let's go.
That's such a good question. I mean, because we're not really sure, but you have to believe that it was reread and reread, right?
Yeah.
And did they let it go out? Hey, can I take it home?
Right.
Can I go copy it?
Did somebody make copies? Yeah. Now you sit and start scribing out copies of the letter.
Epaphroditus is like, I read it, I'm not copying it.
Because it's such a dense book. Dense, not in a heavy way, but in a loaded with nuggets, and especially about attitude adjustment and everything. I'm like, hey, can I take that home for a while? We just take our Bibles for granted. We can open Philippians right here on the phone if we want, and
you can get
multiple copies in this room right now.
Exactly. and they it just was something that. Now, of course, they were a much more disciplined audio. What am I trying to say?
Well, they were an oral culture.
And how they could hear and process, and so they were much more disciplined about that. But still, to only hear it once, I have a hard time believing that they just heard it once.
I don't think so either.
And again, they weren't speaking English, but I think we talked about this in one of our meetings. Probably like if we were just to sit and read the letter of Philippians, we're going through about 20, 30 minutes or so, right? So
if that,
okay.
12 to 15.
12 to 15, okay. But again, no idea how long it would have.
No, but I can imagine they even stopped at certain points and maybe discussed some of it. And then someone piped up and said, well, okay, but now go on. What else does he say?
Yeah, exactly.
What about when he got to Yodi and Syntyche?
Yeah.
Hey, you two. Actually, they weren't sitting together. One was over here.
They're on opposite sides of the room.
I would imagine they're just like, okay, Paul just called us out. We need to solve this.
Right.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's discuss this. Everyone just looks at those two and is like, we're going to hash this out. Yeah. Fascinating and probably very, very exciting, especially in this case where your friend's coming back and a very exciting time, good meal. That's cool. That's fun. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Mark got you on here, and as our senior pastor, I think this is a good opportunity for our listeners. Like, all right, Joyride. So, why that is our title? And again, we've unpacked that pretty clearly here, but almost like or there are some other titles that you were kind of thinking around as well. And then what is your heart? What are you hoping, the people over the next few months get from this book?
Yeah, well, we figured the title should be something about joy. And if it could be a little catchy and sticky, that's not bad either. So Joyride is sort of what we came up with. There
I like joyful, but
joyful. Yeah, there were some different good options out there.
Yeah.
Joyride, and I kind of like the ride idea because it's sort of like as you go through life, as life hits you. In fact, if you were downtown or you watch church at home, I showed that commercial, one of my favorite commercials, which is I think it's an XM commercial.
Yeah, the Sirius.
But the guy pulls in his car, he's just running an errand, and he's got kind of the errand face on, and then this guy pulls in next to him, and he's got the music cranking, and he's like dancing. The whole point is you can go on an errand, or you can take a joyride.
Yeah,
that commercial's always kind of stuck with me because I thought as Jesus people, it's a great question to ask. Like, are we just going through the motions?
Yeah.
Are we going through the errands? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like yesterday, it was a day off, and I was doing some things, errands, projects, and I just realized I just was missing Jesus. It's like, what's the point of doing all these things and not really be in His presence? This morning, I found myself getting too far ahead as far as, when that happens, I'm going to be more happy, or I'm going to be more content. I can't wait until. And the Spirit just spoke to me and said, what about today, Mark? What about right now? Like, can't you be joyful and happy today? And so those kinds of things are really good reminders. That's some of the heart I have for our church, that the Joyride theme can really hit us like right now, no matter what we're going through. Because the thing about life is like 90% attitude, right? Christian life is like 90% attitude for sure. So I don't know if there's a better book in the New Testament to talk about attitude. And so that's my heart, that's my prayer. And of course, Christ is the heart of all of that and the theme of all of that. So.
No, that's very good. Michelle, anything you want to add on to that?
No, I thought that was well said. I love the title.
Oh yeah, no, it's
because it conveys that kind of moving forward, this joy kind of in life and moving in a direction together. So
yeah, I think all right, we're riding high, we should be joyful. Riding low, we should be sorrowful or whatever. But like, what does joy look like in both those instances? I think it's great. Perfect, as you said, perfect book to do that.
Yeah, so. I went on a walk today with one of our staff members rather than just sit in our office, and. We're only about a block down the street, and we run into a guy who was really talkative, and we start talking, and I'm like, you know what, I kind of need to I need to move on, and because I'm on this meeting with this staff guy, and we just kept talking, and we finally said, hey, we're gonna get going. Great to meet you, and he wouldn't leave us. He ended up going on the walk with us.
Oh man!
And it was at first it's kind of like, this is a little weird, but it was awesome. And we shared the Lord with him, and he's new in the community.
Wow.
I mean, I can go on, but I was just like, that was totally spontaneous. It wasn't what I would have planned. Right. At the beginning, it wasn't even what I wanted. Okay, that just shows you where my heart can be. And miss this guy. And it was an awesome hour walking with that guy. Cool. And we came to the church and said, hey, this is where you need to be this weekend. We gave him the times and everything. Yeah. And so I'm hoping to spend more time and to see him.
Yeah, that's such a cool story.
That's not natural for me, but that's where I want to live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
Open to those moments that the Lord brings to us, and then willing to adjust our schedules.
Right.
So.
Oh, totally. That's good. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, now we're getting to our keep digging section. So the resources, how we can kind of pursue further reading if you wish to. So I would like to know something either on the book of Philippians, maybe commentaries or stuff you guys have read, or just this idea of joy even in our life. So Michelle, do you have anything you want to share with listeners?
Yeah, well, I don't have the titles, but there was a couple of commentaries that I actually have bought and I'm enjoying. I'm just kind of getting into those. And I can maybe even, if people emailed Digging Deeper, I can maybe even get them to you. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, definitely.
But I actually came across a book that I've now bought for myself, but it's called The Greco-Roman World of the New Testament Era. And so it was really interesting because, we talked about context earlier, and I was actually having fun this week digging into just how Philippi, that city, how it came about, and just even cultural things that they would have been, that would have been their culture and their world. And so that was actually a very interesting book. I'm excited to get my copy in the mail.
So if you are curious about those commentaries, digging deeper at rivervalleycc.org. You connect with me, we'll connect with you.
I can't remember the authors right now, but they're,
Mark, what about you?
Material like that deals with the culture of the New Testament is... I find that so intriguing because so often we are tempted to think here, and we hear a lot here, that we've never had it so bad. Like it's never been harder to be a Christian. And we all get that because it's crazy times that we're in. But man, you look at like the culture, and it's just as difficult in some ways, probably even more, to be a believer in Christ. So there's nothing new under the sun as far as we need Jesus. We need his help. We're not going to go figure this out. We're not necessarily going to clean everything up and usher in some utopia. As hard as we might try, it's his kingdom, and it's way beyond this earth, right? So anyway, as far as content or resource, reminder again on the Bible Project video. In fact, the e-newsletter that was sent out last week has some good resources right there at the bottom of there. There was a Gospel Coalition commentary. Digital, online, cool. And Dan Owens, who's now with Jesus, he has a commentary that I've been appreciating, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name, but it's his Philippians book from Dan Owens, longtime friend of River Valley, who's now with Jesus.
Okay. And again, that's also something that if you wanted to email us, Digging Deeper, we could get that title when it comes to us. So... Well, guys, Mark, thank you as always. Michelle, glad to have you. This will be the first of many. It'll be fun to go along with you in your journey through school as well. Kind of what Michelle learned this week.
Yeah, really.
All right, guys. Well, we're excited for Philippians. Catch us next week. New guests, new topic. We'll see you then.